Fellow astronomers, my name is Reza Amir Arjumand and I'm the Vice President of the club. So without further ado, let me go to introducing our main speaker tonight. He's a graduate of Pomona College, which is off of Exit 47, for those of you who know what that means. He has got his MA and PhD in UCLA under the directions of Dr. George Abel, who's most famous for the Abel catalog. And he's the director of Griffith Observatory and has just recently led its multi-million-dollar renovation. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ed Krupp.
Thank you. Advance is right there, right? Oh, okay. Thanks. Thanks an awful lot. It's a delight to be back to Orange County and to the Orange County Astronomers. Certainly one of the most together astronomical organizations on the planet. I always am impressed by your programming, and not just, of course, programs like tonight, but your very ambitious and effective activities in observation and outreach. Just terrific. And I also confess, of course, to having traveled the perilous distance from Los Angeles to Orange County. And it occurred to me to remind you that you do owe a debt of gratitude to Los Angeles and Griffith Observatory. We have protected you today from the tsunami. And I hope you'll beg a little indulgence of me just for a minute, but I can never help but acknowledge when I see in the audience my good friend Bob Klein, who is sitting right there. Bob assists us at the observatory very much on his own extraordinary schedule and does stuff for us. And today I just saw the installation of a new ornamentation for one of our conference room tables, and it's two sky maps that fit the contours of the table. Just stunning, Bob. And the fact is that you know, we do a lot of stuff at Griffith Observatory, but we hit the wall regularly on things we just don't know how to do. And then that's okay, we'll just ask Bob to do it. And he does. So I'm grateful, and it's nice to see you here tonight, Bob. Well, obviously I'm talking about 2012, and I know that none of you have really much anxiety about 2012 except for whatever income tax return we'll have to take care of that year, or credit card bill, or whatever. But it's actually quite true. Even today, I had a guest at my office at the observatory, and the woman just confessed that she was terrified of the Maya calendar. And you know, I didn't want to say, yes, those hieroglyphics are really frightening, but there is an anxiety out there because it's like Rosanna Dana says, there's always something, and it's nice to be able to blame it on something. Well, the year 2012 is turning into a badly behaving celebrity, of course. About a dozen books with that title, that year in the title, are already marketing the link between 2012 and the Maya of ancient Mexico and Guatemala, and they include everything, including the Complete Idiot's Guide to 2012. It's a big help, actually. It's all over the newsstand. Archaeology magazine, they didn't make a big deal out of it, but if you look on the cover, you see they've got a 2012 reference in one of those. And the Skeptical Inquirer, of course, down there, not its headliner. But the Skeptic magazine didn't fail me. They put 2000 at the end of the world again, of course. And Sky and Telescope, and in fact, the cover article of the November issue of Sky and Telescope, as many of you probably know, is actually mine, so I'm to blame for that. And then on top of all of that, if you've got 2012, the movie, destroying the planet, but never fear, this, Los Angeles is evergreen for destruction, and this weekend I think Battlefield LA is going to do it all over again, this time with aliens. And because Griffith Observatory is owned and operated by the City of Los Angeles Department of Recreation and Parks, with which I have a strong and abiding identity, but that doesn't mean that I don't take some pleasure in seeing City Hall. Take it! Right. So the movie's destroying the planet, and of course it was in the newspapers and in Hollywood and on the Sunset Strip and at the bus stop and in fact all over the neighborhood and even on the Cinerama Dome in Los Angeles. So what's responsible for all this anyway? Well, it's the Maya. That's who, and we can see exactly what's going wrong. Yeah, I know the feeling. So almost anyone who blades the World Wide Web roller derby or negotiates all-night talk radio from one coast to another understands that the Maya calendar is somehow going to roll up the red carpet of time, put the solar system in some kind of a transcendental alignment with the heart of the Milky Way Galaxy, and then turn the world into a bowling pin as a rogue planet heads down our alley for a strike. None of this, of course, is true. To understand, however, how the ancient Maya calendar has been enlisted in an end-time scenario, marching toward December 21st and winter solstice in 2012, it is useful to know how and when these dysfunctional ideas actually developed. And so I hope you'll bear with me because, of course, the last time we all got worked up over the calendar was the false millennium of January 1st, 2000. Books on the prophetic meaning of that moment were published to catch the big wave of time. And borrowing a forecast from Nostradamus, the 16th century French seer, author Charles Berlitz, actually as early as 1981, had spotlighted 1999 as a possible trouble spot in his book Doomsday 1999. Berlitz actually warned us about the position of the planets, quoting him now, the position of planets calculated to occur in early May 2000. You might have remembered that particular threat, but it's past now, when the pull of their joint alignment is expected by some astronomers, as well as astrologers and psychics, past and present, to cause solar flares on the sun, severe earthquakes, and seismic explosions on the Earth, land changes, and even to affect the Earth's rotational balance. Well, I hope you didn't miss it. So whenever the millennium would arrive, it wouldn't be pretty. And of course, nothing happened, but that doesn't stop us from supposing that something will happen sometime, and that somebody's calendar will have something to do with it. So what exactly is the Maya calendar going to do? Well, according to some, the Maya calendar is going to end time and business as usual on December 21st, 2012. And the 2012 winter solstice will do that by hanging the Maya equivalent of a bunch of zeros on the calendar, sort of like we did at the false millennium, where you get 2000 and everybody just kind of rolls their eyes and goes into a reverie over a string of zeros like that. So the Maya calendar is doing something similar to that, something that's like the close of a period with a bunch of zeros rolling up. In Maya calendrics, however, it's not the end of 1,000 years. It's really the end of Baktun 13, and I know you knew that. So it's not the end of time. Well, Baktun 13, the Maya calendar relied on multiple cycles of time, and the Baktun was just one of them. A Baktun, for the record, is 144,000 days, or a little more than 394 years. And you might think that's an odd way of totaling up days or years. It doesn't sound like any kind of interval or unit that we use, and it isn't. But it worked very well for the Maya with a calendrical system that was very much based on the number 20 and multiples of 20. And when you add a few extra rules to the calendar as they had, that's how numbers like that come up. And these numbers show up in inscriptions like this. This is just a drawing from a Maya monument that indicates a so-called long count date. And the long count date is always telegraphed by this glyph up here. That glyph says, whatever else you got here, it's a long count date. And then the rest of it tells what the date is and other pieces of information. But these glyphs are essentially totals of cycles. And there are cycles like the Baktun and the Katun and the Tun, all appearing in this inscription. And it's like an additive number. Well, the Baktuns is just this glyph here. So, for example, this particular glyph, just for the sake of the record, is the number 10, and it refers to 10 Baktuns, and so it's 10 times 144,000 days. What are they counting up? Well, they're counting up days from a particular starting point, a beginning point, and of course we'll get to that in just a minute. Well, the Maya are regarded, perhaps justifiably, as having developed the most complicated mathematical astronomy in the New World, and this very likely from the Codex Madrid, one of the very few hieroglyphic picture books or picture writing books that have survived from the conquest, may very well be a kind of a symbolic illustration of an ancient Maya sky watcher. We see the fellow sitting inside this frame, but all of these symbols that go around him are actually star symbols. And so, in a sense, it's a representation symbolically of the starry sky. And what's he doing? Well, he's got something like a crescent wrench reaching out of his eye and grabbing onto the stars. And that is direct action for astronomy, for sure. Well, we do know, because we can read Maya hieroglyphics, that the Maya astronomical calculations were reference to a set of calendar cycles that had been adopted throughout Mesoamerica. And I don't intend to explain the intricacies of the calendar. I just throw up a slide like this to tell you, oh yeah, there's a calendar and it's intricate, but you can see that. And the few picture books with hieroglyphic text, here's another example. This is from the so-called Dresden Codex, which is in Dresden, Germany now. So these codices are hieroglyphic texts known to have survived. And the chronicles as well. These are accounts by native informants at the time of the conquest or just after it. These are the sources that reveal an incomplete but a substantive body of information from which much of the calendar has been reconstructed. So when anyone asks how it is that we know any of this information about the ancient Maya calendar, it's because we have some texts and we have the ability through detective work to decipher them, which has taken over a century to do, but in fact has been done, and so we have a fairly good idea of how this calendar and other aspects of Maya writing were put together. In addition, recognition and interpretation of astronomical and calendrical components on carved inscriptions on monuments and buildings have added more data. And this just happens to be a sample of one of those many monuments that come from the classic Maya era. It is at Tikal, a major Maya site in the lowlands of Guatemala, and of course reasonably well preserved. And the inscription that is carved on here includes, among other things, a long count date. And so it's a reference to a particular date that was of interest to the Maya. Well, we know the Maya calendar was accurate, and its accuracy was equivalent to saying that the length of the tropical year is 365.2550 days. Now, they didn't do decimal arithmetic, but the way the calendar works, their estimate of the length of the tropical year was equivalent to that. And the true answer, of course, is 365.2422 days. So, of course, they were off. Well, the Maya estimate is only about 19 minutes in error in a year. And just whoops, I have suddenly lost my, has it gone to sleep on me? Yeah. Maybe I hit a bad button. Well, you're seeing the Maya calendar exerting its pernicious influence, even now. Thank you. And is that not super, by the way? Now, as a brief diversion, because I've obviously mentioned the fact that the Maya, among other things, calculated a length of the tropical year, and fundamentally they were saying that there's 365 days in the year. And so, just for fun, I thought I'd also just show you a couple of pictures. This is not a Maya site. This is a classic Gulf Coast site. It's called El Tajín. It's in the state of Veracruz in Mexico, but it's called the Pyramid of the Niches. And it is said that there are 365 niches on this pyramid, one symbolizing each date in the year. Of course, you can read that kind of thing in books, but how do you know it's really true? Well, actually, I've been to El Tahin and to the Pyramid of the Niches, and I undertook that research and actually counted the niches, so I could tell you just how many there are. Here at Chichen Itza, at Chichen Itza in Yucatan, a later site, the Castillo, or the Pyramid of Kukulkan, also is said to have a calendrical symbolism built into it. It has 4 stairways. You're seeing one of them as it goes up, in that case, the west side. And it is said, and in fact this even goes back to Bishop Landa at the time of the conquest. He was one of the people who said that there are 365 stairs in this pyramid, 91 on each stairway, 4 stairways, and then the final top level for all. Now, of course, this again is one of those many unsubstantiated rumors that really deserves to be verified in the field. And so what you would do, and of course I have done, is go to Chichen Itza and count the stairs. And I could tell you how many of those stairs there are. But we have other important things to cover here. This is all very important to keep in mind, though, about this estimate of an astronomical period. And I was talking about how accurately the calendar reflects a knowledge, in a sense, of the length of the tropical year, just as an example of these kinds of calculations of the Maya. This does not mean that the Maya had instruments that were so precise they could measure the length of the year with a single observation to this accuracy. They could not. That is not what is going on. There is a cumulative result that is acquired over many, many seasons, many, many years of making observations and ultimately developing a calendar really over centuries that reflects this kind of information. It's not that you could ask an individual Maya specialist how many days are there in the year and get a quote of 365.2550 days. There wouldn't even be the sense of how to answer the question like that. But the work that they did calendrarically, at least, is equivalent to that kind of knowledge. But it is important as a point here because it's the apparently uncanny calendric accuracy that was achieved by the Maya that prompt people to be at least more ready to think that the Maya might have known something about the calendar and time and astronomy and the future that we don't. This is not true. But you will hear uninformed claims to the contrary, and they do fuel the conflagration of 2012. Well, the Maya years were numbered from a date endowed with religious and cosmogonical significance, the date of creation of the present world order as far as they were concerned. In our numerical transcription of Maya notation, it was specified, in fact, I think I need to go back there for a second, it was specified as 130004 Ahau 8 Kumku. It sounds like totally unintelligible language, but this is in fact an inscription that is referring to that. It is referring to the beginning of the 13th Baktun, and then it's the very start, so you've got all of these other smaller intervals of time that are 000, and these are just the names of the day. There are 2 calendars in which the day could have a name, and 4 Ahau and 8 Kumku are those names. It's sort of like Wednesday or Friday, the 11th of March. It's kind of equivalent to saying that. And then all of those other numbers are equivalent to saying something like 2011, because that's, after all, what we do. When we specify a number for a year, it's kind of like a long count inscription. We mean it's been 2011 years since the date of an arbitrary starting point, the accepted date for the birth of Christ in our case, and so we just count from that beginning point. And it's kind of exactly what the Maya were doing too, but they were doing it with their arithmetic system and their starting point date. The Maya, of course, were counting primarily in units of 20, and the notations of the year in 20s are in these long count inscriptions. This is where the Baktun business does become important. The long count inscriptions bundle the years in multiples of 20, just as our dates are organized in multiples of 10. And almost all of the Maya calendar intervals accumulated in multiples of 20. In Maya chronology, an interval of 7,200 days was known as a katun. That's about 20 years, and it takes 20 katuns to complete a Baktun. And that's where the 144,000 days comes from. And you would think maybe, really, the next big package of time would be 20 Baktuns, 20 times 20 times 20, as these numbers pile up. And this is where things get a little bit odd in Maya calendric inscriptions, and why it's actually reasonable to be very wary about anything that anybody says about them. Because in fact, by the ordinary rules of the Maya calendar, and obviously this is far more arcane than any of us really care at the moment, but the fact is that you would think that we would be adding up 20 Baktuns, and that the end of Baktun 20 would start the next interval, and 13 has nothing to do with anything. We're in the 13th Baktun now, but that's supposedly what the big deal is all about. Well, the Maya, in fact, did multiply 20 katuns to get a Baktun and 20 Baktuns to get a Piktun and so on. We find inscriptions like that. But we also do find inscriptions that seem to suggest Baktun 13 was of interest to them as well. And it's not like there was some sort of a consistent plan over all of the Maya region and over all time that everybody was in agreement. What you're really seeing are regional variations of people thinking, well, I need to do the calendar like this. Well, I think this is the way it's done. 200 years later, somebody, oh, no, they made a mistake. This is how we do it. And so you don't have a consistent Maya story to tell, but you do have basic rules of the calendar, and these kinds of things are built into these numbers that we see thrown about when people talk about all of this. Well, really, to evaluate the 2012 business, going back to that official starting point again, you have to find out how this kind of talk actually started in the first place. And actually, nobody really paid much attention to the end of Baktun 13 until fairly recently. In 1975, Frank Waters dedicated a brief section to this subject in this book, Mexico Mystique, and he identified the 13 Baktun interval as what he called a Mayan great cycle. He overestimated its duration as 5,200 years, and he equated 5 of these cycles with 5 legendary eras, each of which ends in the world's destruction. He kind of made that up. And then he linked the whole period with the 26,000-year cycle of precession, and the inference was that the Maya were tracking precession, the slow wobbling of the Earth, which changes the seasons with the stars. Again, there is no evidence for any of this whatsoever, but it's described very nicely in that book. Waters freely mixed Aztec tradition with Maya calendrics, overestimated the length of the Great Cycle, and actually miscalculated the date when the calendar would pull down the shades on the world. And it's interesting to see how that happened. But we're all thinking, of course, the world ends on December 21st, 2012. But according to Waters, in that book, and he's the one that got the ball rolling, he writes, the end of the Great Cycle will occur on December 24th, 2011. Now that's trouble. And the world will be destroyed by catastrophic earthquakes. I think the program appears to have begun. So he got this date, this really incorrect date, he got from a book on the Maya by a legitimate Maya expert. But the date in that book had a typographical error. So on top of all of the other errors, Water used the wrong date and wound up ending the world a year early. The year 1970, it didn't matter, of course. I mean, we're well on the way now. The year 1975 hosted another completely independent spotlight on the year 2012. Dennis McKenna and Terence McKenna discussed it in this book, The Invisible Landscape, Mind, Hallucinogens, and the I Ching. How can you go wrong? In that book, McKenna and McKenna at least had the right date for the end of things as we know them, December 21st, 2012. And it is true that Baktun 13 does end on or about December 21st, 2012. And they also correctly mentioned that the location of the winter solstice sun is in the constellation of Sagittarius. And they included this diagram in their book, which fundamentally just shows the solstice collar running through the Milky Way, through Sagittarius, and they wind up saying that winter solstice sun, quote, is in the constellation Sagittarius, only about 3 degrees from the galactic center. That's off by a factor of 2, which also coincidentally is within 2 degrees of the ecliptic. So what they're saying is that the winter solstice sun is really going to be in an extraordinary place in 2012. But what they don't tell you is it's practically exactly where it is right now and where it was in 1975, because the sun doesn't move on the winter solstice point that fast through the Milky Way thanks to precession. So, of course, that is just where the sun is going to be on the winter solstice this year and last year, too. The position of the winter solstice sun against the background sky, as I said, and as you know, does move, but it moves very, very slowly, not fast enough to single out the 2012 winter solstice as something special. Nonetheless, the McKennas did. And the reason they did had nothing to do with the Maya calendar. If you read their book, you won't find the word Maya in it at all. Everything that is calendrically calculated there has to do with their manipulations of numbers in the Chinese I Ching instead. How this comes together, I'm not sure, but the McKenna focus on 2012 was gradually absorbed into pockets of popular culture. And in fact, this comic book panel appeared in the April 1995 issue, that's number 38, of a rather obscure comic book called The Invisibles, a comic book that was published by DC Comics. That's Superman and Batman, the Vertigo line that specializes in the weird and the macabre and the visionary. And as you can see, it's kind of a 1995 sort of party, and they're all hanging out there. And of course, what are they doing? Why, they're quoting Terence McKenna, of course. That happens at all the parties in 1995. Well, broader interest in 2012 was not really ignited until, I kind of worry about that young girl over there on the side who's pondering 2012, and I'll be like 35. That sucks. First, that's really bad language. And I'm way over 35. No, this is very depressing. So the real broad interest in 2012 wasn't really ignited until 1987. And by then, the Maya calendar was the headliner. And it was showcased by Jose Argüelles, who was, quote, an artist, poet, and visionary historian. Now, I'm puzzled already, because I get artist, and I get poet. But visionary historian just kind of eludes me a little bit. Well, that's according to the biography on the back of the book, The Mayan Factor, Path Beyond Technology. And Argüelles linked the 13 Baktun period from 3114 BC, that's the starting point in our calendar of these cycles, to 2012 AD, roughly 5,000 years, with an impalpable beam from the center of the Milky Way Galaxy. According to Argüelles, the Maya knew when we entered this beam and when we would leave it, and they developed their 13 Baktun cycle to mark our passage through it. That's why this time interval is important. So there's the center of the galaxy. It is sending some kind of beam out there. The sun is moving now in orbit around the Milky Way Galaxy, somehow coming in line with this beam, and as a consequence, the world is going to change. Well, according to Argüelles, the 13 Baktuns began, and here's a chart that he includes of them, shows all of the fine Baktuns. It begins in 3114 BC when we have entered the beam, and the end when we exit the beam on the 21st of 2012. And he asserted that the beam operates as, quote, invisible galactic life threads, unquote, that link the individual, the planet, the sun, and the center of the galaxy. Now, keep this center of galaxy business in mind, because he's talking about the center of the galaxy. But that's a little bit different from what is involved with this whole winter solstice business, as we'll see in a moment. Well, neither Maya tradition nor scientific astronomy supports a belief in galactic beams. This beam is instead part of a personal metaphysics that emphasizes, in Argüelles' words, quote, the principle of harmonic resonance. Now, this is all very mystifying and wild, and of course it gets a lot more Baroque, as you can see. Argüelles imagines the planets, and of course he includes Pluto with them. He wasn't with the program that early. And he regards them as orbiting harmonic gyroscopes that play a role in the coordination of the beam. This is actually very handy because it allows you to incorporate astrological principles in all this, because everything is tempered by the movements of the planets, which then advance and accelerated the development of anything containing DNA as the Earth moves through the beam. So the year 2012 will bring then, thanks to the Maya calendar, galactic synchronization. So it's a very rosy apocalypse, after all. Now, back in 1987, Argüelles actually really had his eye on 1987, for he calculated 1617 August 1987 as the first Mayan return entry point, a kind of a prelude to 2012. And he called that event the Harmonic Convergence. And I know some of you may remember the Harmonic Convergence. It became a worldwide New Age phenomenon. The Los Angeles Times called it a, quote, mysterious weekend event. Coincided with the death of Elvis, too. And not the real death, the anniversary. And Argüelles announced that the galactic and planetary harmonic scale would be calibrated then. It would take, however, a global grid of spiritually enlightened persons functioning as a, quote, synchronized and unified bioelectromagnetic collective battery to do the job. So New Age organizers allegedly dispatched 144,000, interesting number, right? Self-appointed seekers to converge upon a set of sacred sites, acupuncture points, in the spiritual circuitry of the planet and establish a resonance between the planet and the rest of the universe. There were 13 of these nodes, including, as you see here, ancient Casa Rinconada in New Mexico's Chaco Canyon. Griffith Observatory was not one of the nodes, but urbanized technological pilgrims without orthodox religious portfolio did assemble on the observatory's front lawn for the harmonic convergence. Of course, cartoonist Gary Trudeau could not let the harmonic convergence go unacknowledged in Doonesbury, and he outlined the two most likely possibilities. On the one hand, the Earth would experience a new age of insight and understanding, of mass unification of divine and Earth plane selves. Alternatively, it might just bring nuclear annihilation. Either way, there will probably be a crafts fair. So the harmonic convergence passed, of course, in 2012, went into hibernation, while other more compelling calendrical catastrophes commanded our attention. During the 1990s, as the world was counting down to the millennium, despite widespread confusion over exactly when it would occur, John Major Jenkins, self-identified as a, quote, leading independent researcher on ancient Maya cosmology, packaged several of the 2012 themes together in Maya Cosmogenesis 2012. And then restating an unfounded belief, in 1995, Jenkins asserted the Maya believed the world will end in 2012. They didn't, and they never said anything like that. And then he attempted to understand why Baktun 13 ends in 2012. Well, one of the reasons it ends in 2012 is because the Maya started it up in 3,114, and when you count all those days, that's why you wind up where you do in 2012. But Jenkins thought that there might be some special meaning to winter solstice 2012, and that's a fair enough question. It's a fair enough question to ask. Precession, he explained, drives the winter solstice across the sky and across the Milky Way, the winter solstice sun, toward a 2012 interception with what he calls the center of the galaxy, by which he means sort of in the bulge of Sagittarius. And Maya astronomers, he said, knew this is coming and constructed their calendar to take it into account. Well, this is really kind of just a repetition of what the McKennas had said, but now done in a Maya framework. So the idea is simply that we're concerned about the winter solstice sun and where exactly it is located compared to the background stars moves over time thanks to precession. And of course, as it moves across the Milky Way, which it's doing now, across Sagittarius. And so the whole point is that on 2012 winter solstice, it will be, in fact, exactly lined up with the Milky Way. And that's what the whole big deal with the Milky Way is all about. So the Milky Way, as you all well know, is just our inside edge-on view of the flattened galaxy in which we reside. And both the ecliptic and the Milky Way are just rings that encircle the sky as we see it from the Earth. And these two circles then intersect each other twice on opposite sides of the sky. Jenkins saw in all of this a very rare alignment destined to occur on December solstice of AD 2012. Excuse me, I'm quoting both. Well, it's not a very rare alignment. He celebrated the precision of this ancient knowledge and says the alignment culminates on that day. It doesn't. And with detail that's not found in any other interpretation of 2012, he linked the calendar's alleged finale with astronomical observations that he attributed to the ancient Maya with very selective interpretations of Maya myth. According to Jenkins, precession drives the winter solstice point to line up with the center of the galaxy, or more or less the bulge of the Milky Way, on December 21st, 2012, much as this diagram kind of indicates. And of course, as you look at the view here we are on the Earth, and we're looking at across the solar system at the sun, and it is in line with Sagittarius, which is on the other side there. And so that's the highly precise alignment that is all under consideration here. And arguing that this configuration is what motivated the Maya to contrive the calendar to end on that date, Jenkins then adds, it will be, quote, a tremendous transformation and opportunity for spiritual growth, a transition from one world age to another. This is very curious because at the same time he said that the Maya thought that everything would end at that time. So it is a tremendous transformation, no question about it. But So reigniting New Age interest in the forthcoming finish of Baktun 13, Jenkins then also propelled the topic into the consciousness of popular culture, not so much through his book, but through the World Wide Web and through syndicated overnight radio shows and through cable television. Conspicuously absent from the refereed academic journals, Jenkins makes appearances and presentations at free-for-all events devoted to improbable archaeology and fringe spirituality. Precession really does slowly shift the position of the winter solstice sun with respect to the background stars, including the Milky Way. That again, is fair game. And the winter solstice sun does, in fact, occur in the Milky Way at this time. But the winter solstice sun never gets closer than 6 degrees to the center of the Milky Way Galaxy, which is really a very large discrepancy, even for the unaided eye. This is, again, one of Jenkins's diagrams, and he's just showing how, over time, the winter solstice sun gradually moves across the Milky Way, and even indicates the location of the galactic center, but with some ambiguous language as well. So the discrepancy here is actually fairly profound. In any case, the fundamental astronomical reference systems really cannot pinpoint the alleged galactic alignment to a year, much less to a given day. And if we can't do it, the Maya couldn't do it either. This is the path of the sun, with the winter solstice gradually slipping, the ecliptic intersection with the galactic equator being the point in question, but it is far, as you can see, in an angular direction from the true galactic center. And of course, the true galactic center is something that is known from our time and from radio measurements of the Milky Way. And why does it come into all this discussion in the first place? Well, remember, there's that impalpable beam from the center of the Milky Way Galaxy. And so you see this mixing and matching of modern knowledge with just basic practical astronomy that people without telescopes would observe in the sky, and none of it is terribly consistent with each other. Well, the alignment relies on several astronomical conventions, including the galactic equator and the visual appearance of the Milky Way. The galactic equator is defined dynamically. Its use in a discussion of Maya astronomy is erroneous and arbitrary and ambiguous. There's no precise definition for the width of the Milky Way. I just give you one of many standard atlases, and the Milky Way is drawn somewhat subjectively by those who create these maps. There is no precise definition for the width of the Milky Way, and that means a precise position for its center line, which the winter solstice sun is supposed to occupy, is really not meaningful here at all. There is no evidence the Maya were interested in or even aware of any future configuration like this of the winter solstice sun and the Milky Way. And as I already mentioned, this notion actually originated in 1975 with Frank Waters, with an incorrect calculation about precession and an inaccurate understanding of Maya calendrics in the first place. The argument linking 13 Baktuns with the Milky Way emerged a dozen years later with another author's personal system of metaphysics, and that interpretation had no foundation at all in genuine Maya thought and astronomical reality. And the current emphasis on alignment of the winter solstice sun and the Milky Way at the end of Baktun 13, and you're just going to keep hearing about this over and over again in newspapers and on Yahoo and everywhere. It requires an accuracy and a precision the Milky Way cannot provide, the center of the galaxy contradicts, and the Maya simply could not observe. Despite repetitious claims to the contrary, there really is no evidence to indicate the ancient Maya saw the calendar in a world age ending in either rapture or catastrophe on December 21st, 2012. And there's virtually no evidence that they attributed any remarkable importance to that year. Some Maya long count dates actually refer to dates in the far future. This is one of the temple pyramid platforms at Palenque in Chiapas, Mexico. And there are inscriptions by the kings of Palenque that refer to extraordinary future dates in time, where they're projecting such and such a thing as taking place in a recapitulation of ancient history. But the date on which they take place is thousands and thousands and thousands, even millions of years in the future, well past the end of time of 2012. And in fact, there is only one long count date at all known. It comes from Tortuguero, a Maya site in the Mexican state of Tabasco. Here's a drawing of it. This is the only monument with an inscription that even refers to this date of the end of Baktun 13. The text is damaged, but what little can be read of it says nothing at all about any idea of the end of time. There's no implication there whatsoever. Furthermore, on winter solstice 2012, the sun will be a respectable distance, as I said, about 6 degrees from the galactic center, so there really is no precise alignment. Now, given all of that, you would think this story would be over, but some advocates for 2012 catastrophe say that a planetary alignment will occur in 2012. Well, that's good. We can just check the planets, and there they are, distributed. I've included Pluto, just because I'm soft-hearted. So there is no planet alignment on winter solstice in 2012. Nonetheless, the harbingers of doom affiliate a fictional alignment with astrological predictions or with specious claims about a reversal of the Earth's magnetic field and unprecedented solar storms. And we're just, of course, finally emerging from an unexpectedly long lull in solar activity. No doubt we are going to see some pretty unprecedented solar storms. We always do. But there is no evidence that we're going to hit solar max right on December 21st, 2012, and that it's going to bring down the curtain. The galactic alignment, harmonic, cosmic synchronization Maya calendar shutdown actually makes no sense archaeologically and astronomically, but that does not mean that you get a get-out-of-calendar catastrophe-free card from this. Postings on the World Wide Web and conversations on all-night apocalyptic radio have warned us the cosmos has us targeted. There are several threads of irrational thought that have created an internet phantom, the secret planet Nibiru, and put it on a trajectory toward Earth. There's the Skeptical Inquirer with a little reference to Nibiru down in the corner and its connection with 2012. There is, of course, no such planet, Nibiru, although now it is often equated in some of these inflammatory statements that you can find if you are somehow compelled, as I am, to seek them out, with Eris, the Plutoid orbiting the Sun, of course, beyond Pluto. Even if Eris had our name on it, and we're falling out of its orbit and careening our way, it just can't possibly reach us by 2012. It's just too far away. Some, however, insist that a NASA conspiracy is in play. No doubt there is. There's always a NASA conspiracy in play. And that Nibiru, it's called government. And Nibiru is approaching. It was supposed to be visible, actually already, on Earth by May 2009, just in time for the International Year of Astronomy. But it failed to deliver a starry message. Nibiru should have shown up, but it was a no-show. Others on the web, confused about an alignment of the winter solstice sun with the Milky Way's center, have declared that the sun is actually moving to the center of the Milky Way Galaxy and dragging the Earth along with it, and they predict that the polar axis of the Earth will shift without any regard to just how long it's going to take us to get to the center of the galaxy from here. Dr. David Morrison, an astronomer who invites questions on his website, has been overwhelmed with inquiries about Nibiru, and I can understand. Not so much Nibiru, but 2012 is the most frequently asked question that we get from people just visiting Griffith Observatory. Morrison was bombarded by complaints that NASA is suppressing the truth. He wrote, "These come from people who seem to want the world to end in 2012 and who are upset to be told that this catastrophe will not happen." Well, most of what is claimed for 2012 relies on muddy thinking and pseudoscientific folly, an extraordinary ignorance of basic astronomy, a stunningly poor command of grammar, vocabulary, composition, and actually a level of paranoia worthy of Night of the Living Dead. And so you can understand why I got depressed many years ago at Tikal, where I had agreed in this bar that I would return there when we all knew at that time that Baktun 13 was going to end on December 21st, 2012. And why don't we just all come back to Tikal on that date and celebrate? I'm not going near Tikal on winter solstice of 2012. So maybe the Maya were on to us after all. You know, the clock is ticking, even in Maya numerals up there. And it is the end of the world as we know it. Thank you very much. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I've been advised that we can take a few questions, and so if anyone has any questions, I'll try to answer them. Yes, sir. Yeah. You made a statement that you followed this kind of stuff for years, and of course this is a familiar experience. And then you asked the heartbreaking question: why is it that people want to believe this kind of thing? It's actually not such a strange thing. It has to do with our brains. We are pattern-seeking creatures, and our brains are designed to look for patterns and to identify them. That's a survival tool. And we do, in fact, seek out patterns, and we try to make sense out of things, and we relate this to this to this to this. And that process of associative thought is actually very valuable and has probably had a big part to play in our evolution and survival up to this time. But we also have the capacity in our brains to engage in critical analysis that allows us to test the validity of the kinds of patterns that we think we're seeing. That is to say, is there cause and effect between these? Standard scientific analysis. But that is a discipline that is not typically part of everyday life. And the recognition of pattern and the romance of the recognition of pattern are in part what fuels this. Now, there are many different individual motivations that occur, of course, with people. But the satisfying thing about this for many people is the notion, oh, the calendar is tied up with the cosmos, which is tied up with the planet in my life. And it makes some kind of sense, only because it seems to be a pattern. And that's how our brains behave. So my cheap and dirty answer to the question. Any other questions? Way over there, yeah. It's suddenly I've forgotten his middle name. It's John Jenkins, and I've just suddenly misplaced his middle name. The first book was Maya Cosmogenesis 2012, easily available. You could Amazon, whatever. And Jenkins has since published a second book, and I would not be surprised if another one comes out in time for 2012. And then also has at least one similar article in a collection of various articles like this. But Jenkins, Jenkins 2012 will get you there. Yeah, up there. The question had to do with the mystery planet that's supposed to be out there and coming to hit us. Isn't that actually been called by someone else our partner's sun that we really can't see very well, but it's out beyond the Oort cloud and is perturbing things out there and perhaps sending comets in toward us, which will hit us. And that object was called Nemesis a few years ago by a perfectly reasonable name, if there's an object like that out there. And the arguments that have been mounted to support the existence of such an object are extremely flimsy. And so there is, while it's entirely possible for the sun to have a distant, faint partner that is disrupting the Oort cloud and making us all unhappy, the fact is that we don't have real evidence that it exists at this time. But because it has that lurid pulp fiction quality to it, of course it gets brought up in discussions like this. And this is the nice thing about our cumulative knowledge base. Every time there is a new threat to the world imagined, you get to add all of the old threats into it. And so they all wind up. It's not like there's a systematic conversation going on out there. It's like, let me pull it out of the air, and different people do. Sorry, I drift away. Another question. Anybody else? Yeah. Is there any extant evidence of the instruments that the Maya used to make their observations? And the really easy answer to that is no. There have been a few attempts to identify either places or possible instruments that would work. And there are some hints of things. For example, there are some observational techniques that have been preserved among traditional people. They're very straightforward. You have a stick in the ground, you use a sighting, and somebody's responsible, kind of like the Hopi sun chief watching the horizon. So there certainly is. There are systematic techniques available, but confirming that in antiquity this is what we did, no, that evidence does not exist. There are little diagrams, not so much from the Maya territory, but from what's called Mixteca Puebla, kind of the Altiplano, central Mexico. And they show little figures in temples looking over crossed sticks with a star symbol in the notch of the crossed stick. Now, that's not regarded as a picture of an observatory. It's actually a name. It's sort of like the name of the place, and it was known because there was an observatory. You call it like Palomar, and everybody knows, oh yeah, there's the observatory at Palomar, so you use the picture to reference it. But that kind of evidence indirectly has been supposed to suggest types of instruments that may have been used, but no instruments have survived. Yeah. Well, the question had to do, I mean, and actually the question in its fairest form is, would I care to elaborate? And I wouldn't, but the question had to do with I had mentioned the idea that people bring up the notion of various shifts of the Earth. And what they proposed, a couple of different things are proposed. One is simply a physical flipping of the Earth. You know, the Earth is got its axis rotating, as we all know, with the axis pointing to Polaris, and then it just physically goes in a different direction, swings around, and you just hope that the coefficient of friction on all of our shoes is good enough to keep us there, and as all the trees snap over. That kind of thing gets mixed up with reversal of polarity of the magnetic field of the Earth, which we do know, of course, occurs, but over long periods of time. And we also, it also gets equated with the idea that there is a reversal then in the, not, I said the polarity, but also the exact position. And of course, we also know that the magnetic poles wander because of the internal dynamo, whatever, that's going on inside the Earth to create it. So people imagine that without mechanism, without calculation, without justifiable evidence, that these kinds of things happen, and imagine that they would have catastrophic results. And if they happen very quickly, they very well might. Maybe one last question, and then you... Yes? Yeah. What is going to happen... Actually, a very salient question. What is going to happen with Baktun 14? Well, after Baktun 13 ends and Baktun 14 starts, it will keep going and going through all of these cycles until we get to the end of Baktun 14, and then Baktun 15 starts.